Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel. Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. The world moves fast. A crisis can flare up. And that very problem, that paralysis, is what we are diving deep into today.
Yeah.
We're looking for a solution, or at least a proposed one. A radical blueprint that tries to solve that exact challenge.
The very specific one.
Very specific. This deep dive is focusing on excerpts from the book, The Nuclear Umbrella, specifically from Volume 4, which is the Blueprint series. And just to be precise for our returning viewers, this is the Episode 32 documentation, all derived from the strategic vision written by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
And I think it's important to state our mission for today. We're being very laser focused here. We're not getting into the politics or the why behind this proposed alliance.
No, this is a purely structural analysis.
It's strictly about the how. Specifically, the command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance blueprint. The C4ISR. I mean, the central question is, how do you build the functional nervous system for an alliance of sovereign nations? How do you make it so it can turn raw intelligence data into a decisive physical action in minutes? But, and this is the key, while still adhering to international law and respecting the sovereignty of every single member state.
That dual requirement, that's the paradox, isn't it? Speed and sovereignty. They almost seem mutually exclusive. So we're basically exploring the operational spine of this proposed entity.
We are. And C4ISR, I mean, that is the perfect metaphor, the nervous system.
Let's break that down for anyone who might not live and breathe this acronym. The I and S, intelligence and surveillance, those are the sensors. The eyes and ears gathering data from satellites, radar, human intelligence, everything.
Then that data has to flow somewhere. It goes through the next C's, the computers and communications, the network, the backbone.
It then reaches the first C, which is the commander, who exercises the control function, which leads to the final R, reconnaissance, or I think in modern usage, it's really about decisive response.
Exactly. And if that spine is compromised at any point, if the intelligence flow is slow, if the lines of communication are brittle, or, and this is the most common failure point, if the decision nodes are deliberately congested by political requirements,
then it's all for nothing.
Precisely nothing. All the kinetic power, the billions you've invested in hardware, it means absolutely zero. And the blueprint seems to understand this at a fundamental level.
Yeah.
So today we are going to unpack this extremely lean, lawful, and rapid decision system. We're going to focus intensely on those structural and doctrinal mechanisms that are intended to prevent that traditional catastrophic alliance paralysis.
So to do that, I think we have to start with the philosophical foundation. The blueprint calls it the doctrine of decisiveness. It's fascinating because it doesn't begin with tanks or planes or ships. It begins with a really clear, almost brutal assessment of the cost of delay.
It does, and it moves far beyond just general warnings about being too slow. It presents the cost of delay as something quantifiable. You can measure it in strategic loss and, frankly, in human lives.
So what are some of those specific, real-world consequences that are detailed in the source material? Why is speed so paramount?
Well, the most immediate military consequence is a concept they call missed interception windows. Modern warfare is. It's incredibly transient. An opportunity can appear and disappear in the blink of an eye.
Give us an example.
Okay, so imagine an intelligence asset. Let's say a satellite or an advanced radar system spots an imminent threat. It could be an incoming ballistic missile or maybe a squadron of stealth aircraft making a run for a border. The window you have for an effective counteraction might be measured in single-digit minutes. 5 minutes, maybe 6.
And if the decision to actually engage that threat takes, say, 48 hours because you need to get 15 different defense ministers on a conference call to agree.
The threat isn't just not neutralized, it has already achieved its objective. It's over. The window for defense didn't just close, it's gone entirely. The damage is done.
And that clock, it runs even faster when you move into the humanitarian realm.
It runs faster, and with, I would argue, even graver consequences. The sources highlight this tragic reality of humanitarian corridors closing before aid can pass. Think about a conflict zone or a major natural disaster. A local ceasefire might open up a tiny window. Maybe it's 4 hours, maybe 8 if you're lucky for safe passage of food, water, medicine.
A lifeline.
A critical lifeline. But if the alliance's logistics, its security authorizations, customs clearances, funding approvals, if all of that takes days to process, that window slams shut. The aid never reaches the vulnerable population. And that delay, It transforms from a simple military inefficiency into a massive moral failure and a public relations disaster.
So this really speaks to the broader application of this C4ISR backbone. It isn't just for kinetic warfare, it's also about rapid logistics, even administrative speed.
It absolutely is. And that brings us to the primary strategic cost, the one that big, slow alliances always seem to face. Adversaries successfully setting facts on the ground during a crisis.
The classic fait accompli strategy.
It's textbook. A geographically smaller or maybe militarily weaker adversary acts with incredible speed and decisiveness. They change a border, they seize a contested oil field, they land troops on a disputed island. They create a new status quo.
And once that's done, the political leverage they gain is just immense.
It's huge. Because the adversary knows that for the slow-moving, lumbering alliance to reverse that fait accompli, to undo those facts on the ground, it will take weeks, maybe months, to generate the political consensus for a massive, costly, and politically risky counter-operation.
So the adversary gets the initial prize, and at the same time, they make the alliance look weak.
Weak, indecisive, and strategically irrelevant in a crisis. The delay itself becomes a weapon used against the collective. The paralysis is the prize.
Okay, so given that dire assessment, the counter-doctrine has to be absolute, an operational commandment, and the blueprint defines it as fast, lawful, collective action without paralysis.
That's the mantra.
Now, my question, and I think this is where the real analysis begins, is about that word, lawful. If the overriding #1 imperative is speed, why on earth is lawfulness given equal weight? Doesn't the requirement for a legal review, by its very nature, slow things down?
That is the core friction point, and it's a brilliant question, but the blueprint argues very forcefully that lawfulness is not a speed limiter, it's the strategic life support for the whole operation.
Oh, so?
Because speed without lawfulness is just recklessness. It's impulsive overreaction. If the alliance acts unilaterally or disproportionately or without a crystal clear legal justification under international or regional law, it immediately sacrifices its legitimacy.
And losing legitimacy means losing allies, losing public support. You risk the entire mission falling apart from the inside.
Correct. The consequence of a rapid but unlawful action is, well, it's massive diplomatic fallout. It could be international sanctions. It could even be domestic political collapse within some of the member states whose populations don't support the action.
So the blueprint solution is what? How do you make it both fast and lawful?
By doing the legal work ahead of time. The blueprint recognizes that if a commander has to act within minutes, they cannot afford the time to call a team of lawyers or political advisors to interpret policy while under fire. It's just not feasible.
So the legal justification, the rules of engagement, the ROE, it has to be ironclad and pre-approved.
Universally accepted and pre-approved by the political authority during peacetime. Lawfulness, in this model, prevents the rapid action from escalating uncontrollably or from alienating the rest of the world. It builds the guardrails for speed.
That makes perfect sense. So the speed ensures operational effectiveness on the battlefield, but the lawfulness ensures the strategic credibility and political sustainability of the alliance itself. It's about pursuing what the blueprint calls the decision advantage.
Right. It's not just about who decides first. It's about who decides correctly.
And correctly means quickly, effectively, and lawfully.
And the only way to achieve that, as the sources really emphasize, is to move the most time-consuming part, the political consensus gathering, the endless debates, from the moment of the crisis to the moment before the crisis. And that entire functional premise is what's institutionalized in this structure they call the governance triad.
Okay, let's transition to that structure, the governance triad. It's a really fascinating solution because it tries to keep those essential layers of political control, which you need for sovereignty, but still allow the military execution arm to move with, incredible speed.
It's all about distributing responsibility without diluting accountability.
So what are these three interlocking authorities? How do they work together?
So the triad consists of the political authority, the military authority, and the operational authority. And it's important to see them not as like parallel bodies that are all working at once, but as a defined sequential flow of command and oversight.
A waterfall, almost.
Sort of. Their whole purpose is to prevent any single node from becoming a fatal bottleneck during a crisis. Whether that bottleneck is political disagreement or, military incompetence, the structure is designed to route around it.
Okay, let's start at the very top. 1.
The political authority, which is embodied by the Council of Defense Ministers. This is where state sovereignty has to be respected above all else.
Absolutely. This council, made up of the defense ministers or their equivalents from each member state, is the ultimate authority. Their role is purely strategic. They set policy. They define the alliance's strategic red lines. They provide the ultimate political authorizations for any action.
So they're defining the if and the when.
Precisely. They define if we will act and when certain conditions are met. But, and this is critical, they must avoid getting bogged down in the military how. The success of the entire alliance structure hinges on the Council's ability and its willingness to delegate. If they can't do that, the whole system fails before it even starts. And this brings us right back to that core engine of speed. The emergency provisions and this mechanism of pre-delegated authority. We really need to spend some time here and explain the practical mechanics of this. What does it actually look like?
Pre-delegation is the engine of speed. There's no other way to put it. It means that in peacetime, the Council gets together and identifies specific, predictable threat categories in advance.
So they're basically wargaming the future.
In a way, yes. They're creating a playbook. For example, they'll create a category for unconfirmed foreign ballistic missile launch, or hostile incursion over border zone Gamma, or major cyber attack on critical infrastructure Delta. And for each one of those categories, they legally establish the response parameters ahead of time.
So in peacetime, this political body is running through simulated crises. They're having their lawyers vet the responses, and they're literally signing off on specific rules of engagement for these hypothetical threats.
Exactly. They're establishing the legal criteria and the resulting response mandates. For example, they might create a rule that stipulates, if a radar system confirms a ballistic missile of type of launch profile aimed at a member state capital, and that confirmation comes from two separate fused intelligence sources, then authorization for intercept systems X and Y is granted instantly. The Council defines the parameters, and then they step back.
Which means that when the actual threat materializes in the real world, the military commander on the ground doesn't need to get on the phone and try to get 18 different defense ministers to give permission to fire.
No. That permission was already granted, perhaps months or years ago, contingent on the threat meeting that predefined legal threshold. It completely shifts the political workload. During the crisis, the focus moves away from debate and moves to confirmation.
So the military command is just confirming that the situation on their screen matches the criteria for one of these pre-approved plays from the playbook.
That's it. It's usually done via automated systems and a very quick consultation. This whole process preserves that critical decision speed during the high-pressure window, and it overcomes the exact paralysis that cripples traditional alliances. It's a formalized, anticipatory political consensus.
Okay, so that's the political intent. Once that's established, we move down to 2. The military authority, which is the military committee. This is where, I guess, the rubber meets the road on interoperability.
It is. This committee is the operational planning layer. It's composed of the chiefs of staff from the member nations or their designated high-level representatives. Their focus is almost entirely technical and doctrinal.
They're the engineers of the system.
That's a great way to put it. They're concerned with one fundamental challenge, ensuring that if the political council mandates a unified action, the disparate national forces, which come from nations with different languages, different equipment, different military doctrines, can actually operate as a single cohesive fighting unit.
And this is where their primary role, what the blueprint calls the conversion function, comes in. What are they converting exactly?
They're translating the broad political intent from the Council, which might be something as simple as deter maritime aggression in the Gulf, into incredibly detailed, executable military orders. And this conversion process has to address huge friction points.
Like what?
Well, standardizing logistics, for one. You have to ensure all the different aircraft can use the same fuel, that munition standards are compatible. Then there's unifying command language, often it's English or another designated working language. And probably the most complex part is harmonizing those rules of engagement.
So everyone knows exactly when they can and cannot fire.
Exactly. If the political mandate allows for response Y, the committee has to make sure that every single national component, from the fighter pilot in the cockpit to the naval captain on the bridge, is operating under the exact same legally consistent set of rules for engagement, targeting, and crucially, collateral damage minimization.
So they're taking a high-level political goal and producing a thick, detailed instruction manual that every member state agrees to follow, despite all their national differences. That sounds like an enormous undertaking in peacetime.
It is the work. It's the hard, grinding work that ensures a fast decision in a crisis doesn't just lead to operational chaos on the battlefield. They define the force composition, the logistical pipeline, the C2 linkages, everything.
Which brings us to the final piece of the triad. 3, the operational authority, which is the Supreme Allied Command, or SC. This is the executive arm.
The SAC is the operational commander. This is the entity and the person responsible for maintaining 247 readiness and actually directing the forces in the field. Their role is pure moment-to-moment execution.
So they're at the tip of the spear.
They are. They receive the detailed, standardized orders that were generated by the military committee. They ensure those orders align with the existing political authorizations from the council. And then they execute the operation, usually by channeling those orders down through subordinate regional commands. They are the central node that initiates physical movement.
So to put it all together, the triad resolves that speed versus sovereignty conflict by, what, separating the jobs?
By separating the jobs and, more importantly, separating the timelines. The political body, the council, handles the ultimate if and when, but they do it in advance. The military body, the committee, handles the how and where in painstaking detail, also in advance. And that leaves the operational body, the SAC, to handle the immediate go during the crisis.
So sovereignty is respected at the council level by defining the boundaries beforehand.
Right. But once those boundaries are set, action is enabled at the military and operational levels through pre-agreed rules and structural delegation. You strategically quarantine all the political complexity in peacetime, which allows for military simplicity and speed to take over during the crisis itself.
That structural separation is key. But, I mean, a great structure only matters if the process actually runs smoothly. And that brings us to the operational rhythm, the actual step-by-step process of turning data into action, which the blueprint calls the decision ladder. So the blueprint lays out this 5-step decision ladder, a process designed specifically to achieve that goal of fast, lawful, collective action. Now, the sources do refer to this as an Article 5 mechanism, which is, political shorthand for a collective defense framework. Some sources even use the political designation Muslim Article 5. We should be really clear here. We're analyzing the technical mechanics of the process, not the political label itself, right?
That's absolutely right. The designation just references the idea of a codified automatic collective defense commitment. An attack on one is an attack on all. Our focus is on the functional innovation that's supposed to make that commitment real.
Which is?
The use of strict time caps for each and every step. This ensures that momentum is never lost to bureaucratic drag or indecision. This, I think, is what fundamentally distinguishes this model from the traditional drawn-out diplomatic debates we're used to seeing.
Okay, let's start the clock then. Step 1, alert.
The alert phase is technology-driven. It's intelligence-centric. This is the moment the entire system switches from its routine day-to-day monitoring to full-blown crisis mode.
What triggers it?
Fused intelligence assets. You're talking about space-based sensors, long-range radar, cyber threat monitoring systems. All of their data gets fused together. The system confirms that a credible threat exists, and crucially, that it violates one of those pre-agreed red lines defined by the political council. The key here, and this is mandated by the lawfulness requirement, is shared confirmation.
Meaning everyone sees the same data at the same time.
Exactly. All the relevant member states must receive and process the same initial, verified data simultaneously over the secure C4ISR network. This gives you immediate technical and intelligence buy-in, and it minimizes the chance of one nation trying to dispute the threat's reality later on in the process.
Okay, so the alert is triggered. The system immediately jumps to step 2, consult. And this, to me, seems like the biggest logistical challenge. The blueprint specifies this rapid secure conference has to take place in minutes.
Minutes. Not hours, not as soon as possible. Minutes. And we cannot overstate the logistical demands required to make that a reality. You're talking about decision makers, ministers, chiefs of staff, their authorized proxies who are scattered across multiple continents and time zones.
And they all have to get on a secure line instantly.
Instantly. On a rapid, secure, encrypted video conference line to assess the threat and confirm that the situation fits within the pre-authorized parameters that were established by the council.
What kind of infrastructure has to be in place for consult in minutes to be anything more than just a pipe dream on a piece of paper?
Technologically, you need hardened, dedicated, high-speed, secure video teleconferencing systems, VTCs, installed in primary and secondary command centers for every single participating nation. These lines have to be instantly accessible and resistant to jamming.
And culturally, institutionally.
Institutionally, the system demands constant readiness. Every key decision maker has to have an instantaneous backup or an agreed-upon proxy who is empowered to make decisions, ready to join that consultation chain at all times, 24/7. If the time cap for the consultation is, let's say, 6 minutes, the failure of one nation's representative to join within that window cannot be allowed to stop the process.
So the consultation itself is very streamlined. It's not a debate about whether to act. It's just a confirmation of which pre-approved action applies to the threat profile they're seeing.
Exactly. It's a checkbox exercise, essentially.
But what happens if the time cap is breached? What if they can't reach consensus in 6 minutes?
The blueprint is explicit about this. The system has to trigger a codified fallback. Breaching the time cap doesn't mean you just wait longer. It means the system automatically escalates the alert state, or it pushes the decision to a predefined contingency plan, often transferring the authority to the next available tier of command to prevent paralysis.
So there's a penalty for delay.
A huge one. The penalty isn't just losing time, it's losing control over the decision-making process. That forces maximum adherence to the clock.
This disciplined pace then leads directly into step 3, authorize.
And this is where all that peacetime work really pays off. If the consultation confirms the threat criteria are met, if the system validates that threat X is happening, and the Council pre-approved response Y for threat X, then the authorization is instantaneous.
It's not a new political decision.
No, it's the fulfillment of an existing legally vetted mandate. The Supreme Allied Command, or the Empowered Regional Command, receives the green light. The authorization phase essentially becomes a mechanical trigger. It's just the system confirming the congruence between the threat and the pre-approved ROE.
And then we immediately move to step 4, act.
Right. The action phase is the conversion of that instant authorization into physical movement. This is where forces deploy, interception operations begin, or rapid logistical mobilization kicks off. And this, of course, requires that all the designated rapid response forces are maintained at an extremely high state of readiness.
You can't have a 5-minute decision process if it takes 5 hours to get the jets in the air.
You absolutely can't. The military units have to have aircraft fueled, crews briefed, systems online, and logistical staging already pre-positioned near their deployment points. The speed of the decision has to be precisely matched by the speed of physical execution.
And finally, the essential follow-through. Step 5, stabilize. Why is this post-action phase so critical to a rapid response doctrine? It seems like the job is done at step 4.
Because the stabilization phase ensures that the rapid military action actually serves the long-term strategic goal rather than just generating more instability. It includes things like diplomacy, managing the information environment, and humanitarian follow-through.
A swift military action is only the first chapter.
It is. Stabilization means you're immediately reaching out to the international community, to allies, even to adversaries, to state clearly and publicly the lawful justification for what you just did. It prevents your rapid action from being viewed as an aggressive, unjustified escalation.
It's about controlling the narrative and maintaining the moral high ground.
Exactly. And if the action involves kinetic engagement, stabilization includes rapid damage assessment, immediate diplomatic messaging to prevent further escalation, and, if it's applicable, providing aid or relief to anyone affected. By including stabilization as a mandated step with its own process, the blueprint acknowledges that military speed must be contained ethically and politically.
Ultimately, it seems like the application of those strict time caps to each phase is the secret sauce. It institutionalizes momentum and discipline.
It forces the necessary structural readiness. It takes away the diplomatic luxury of having infinite time for consultation and replaces it with a hard operational requirement for consensus in minutes. It changes the entire culture of the organization.
Okay, so we've explored the structure, the triad, and the process, the ladder. But an alliance like this proposes to cover a vast multi-regional area. There's still a risk of everything collapsing into a central bottleneck at the Supreme Allied Command, right?
Yeah.
Even with pre-delegation.
Absolutely. Centralizing every single decision from a low-level maritime incident in the Gulf to a high-level strategic threat in Central Asia is a recipe for guaranteed delay and SAC burnout. It just wouldn't work.
So the blueprint's answer is regional delegation.
Exactly. It mandates a decentralized structure by identifying key operational regional commands. The blueprint names the Gulf, South Asia, MENA, Africa, and Central Asia. These are the functional geographical centers of operational command.
And the key feature here is that these regional commands are explicitly empowered to act, but only within defined envelopes of authority. That sounds like an incredibly complex legal and operational map you'd have to draw.
It is the fine print of delegation, and it has to be meticulous. The SAC sets the overall strategic direction and handles the really high-consequence multi-regional threats. But the regional commander, who has that intimate knowledge of the local threat matrix, the cultural context, the political environment, can execute instant responses as long as they remain strictly within their specified envelope.
And that achieves the core goal the blueprint talks about: local speed with central coherence.
That's the goal.
Walk us through what one of these envelopes might contain. How detailed do these boundaries get?
Oh, they have to be exceedingly detailed. An envelope would define the exact parameters of the local commander's independence. For example, the maximum force level they can deploy without getting central approval, like you can deploy up to 2 battalions or 6 naval vessels. It would also define the geographic limits of their operation. You cannot cross international boundary X. It would specify the types of kinetic action they can authorize. For instance, you can engage non-state actors, but you cannot engage state-level naval assets without SAC approval. And it would also list the political conditions under which they must consult the SAC, regardless of any time cap.
So the regional commander has the speed to deal with an imminent, localized threat. But the central command, the SAC, makes sure that that local action doesn't inadvertently escalate a fragile diplomatic situation or undermine a larger strategic effort.
Precisely. This delegation ensures the Supreme Allied Command isn't a single choke point fielding calls about minor incidents all day. They only have to focus on the strategic high-level threats that truly require multi-regional consensus or the deployment of assets that are beyond a single region's capacity.
Now, none of this, the triad, the ladder, the regional commands, none of it works without the technological foundation. We have to dive into the C4ISR technology itself. I mean, secure communications and cyber hardening. This system has to be able to survive a concerted attack.
Oh, absolutely. If the decision ladder is the nervous system, then the C4ISR technology is the highly defended biological infrastructure that supports it. It's the neurons, it's the protective skull, it's the immune system. The alliance's networks have to be secure against interception, jamming, deception, and internal compromise.
The blueprint details some pretty stringent requirements for that, starting with the architecture. Let's talk about the concept of air gapping in this context. It's more than just unplugging a computer from the internet, right?
Far more. The requirement for encrypted air-gapped networks means that the most critical decision-making systems, the networks that carry the formal authorization to launch an interceptor or deploy forces, are physically and logically isolated from any public or potentially compromised networks.
So no physical connection at all?
No physical connection. This is often achieved with redundant fiber optic lines that never touch the public internet. And you have rigorous protocols that forbid introducing any external media, like a USB stick. This is what prevents external cyber intrusions from ever reaching the core command architecture during that critical authorization phase.
And encryption protects the data while it's moving.
Right. Encryption protects the data in transit across the network, so even if an adversary manages to physically tap the line, all they get is gibberish.
Then there's the necessity of multi-factor authentication, MFA. And we're not talking about logging into your email here. We're talking about initiating very high consequence actions.
Exactly. In a crisis, the integrity and the identity of the person sending or receiving an operational order have to be verified instantly and without a shadow of a doubt. MFA in this context is probably going to involve more than just a password and a code on your phone.
Biometrics.
It could be biometric verification coupled with an authorized hardware key or token. And it would often require a 2-person rule for any high-consequence system command. This ensures that a single compromised password can't lead to a false authorization, or, just as dangerously, the injection of false intelligence that's designed to trick the alliance into acting inappropriately or delaying fatally. It builds that critical digital trust during the consultation phase.
And the third technical requirement focuses on survival, redundancy via both satellite and fiber optics. Why is having both so necessary?
Because any smart enemy is going to prioritize neutralizing your communication infrastructure first. Fiber optic cables give you incredible bandwidth and stability, but they're vulnerable. They can be physically cut or targeted by localized sabotage.
And satellites.
Satellite communications give you global reach and are harder to neutralize on a global scale, but they're susceptible to atmospheric interference, to jamming, and increasingly to space-based anti-satellite attacks. By mandating redundant pathways, so the critical order can travel simultaneously over multiple dissimilar networks, the blueprint ensures that a localized attack on one piece of infrastructure doesn't immediately cause decision paralysis across the entire alliance. The bet is that an adversary can't simultaneously cut every fiber line and jam every satellite link at the exact same moment.
And this entire technical backbone, It has to be tested
Yeah.
constantly, which brings us to the institutional self-challenge of cyber red teaming.
Red teaming is an operational commandment in this blueprint. It's not a suggestion, it's a dedicated continuous function. You have dedicated teams, often external, highly skilled adversarial teams, who are constantly employed to actively probe the alliance's defenses.
So they're paid to be the bad guys.
They are paid to think and act like the most sophisticated adversary imaginable. They look for vulnerabilities, they try to jam or spoof communications, and most importantly, they try to execute deception attempts.
What are these red teams specifically looking for in the context of our decision ladder?
They're trying to achieve strategic deception or operational denial. For example, they might try to insert false data during the initial alert phase to make the alliance overreact to a non-existent threat, wasting resources and credibility.
Or they could attack the consult phase.
Exactly. They might try to hijack the MFA system during the consultation to inject a denial of service attack, deliberately breaching the time cap and causing the very paralysis the system is designed to prevent. The whole goal of continuous red teaming is to ensure that the rapid decisions made by the command structure can survive sophisticated electronic warfare, cyber attacks, and intelligence deception efforts. It guarantees that the intelligence driving the decision is validated as genuine.
The speed of the decision is only as valuable as the integrity of the data that drives it. And that institutional humility, that willingness to constantly test and challenge your own security, that really does seem like the bedrock of the entire operational capability.
Okay, so we've covered the structure, the process, and the technology. Now we get to see the blueprint put into action. The source material details a few crisis scenarios that really illustrate how the governance triad and the decision ladder are supposed to function under extreme pressure.
And they're great because they show the versatility of the system. They move us from an immediate kinetic response to strategic deterrence and even humanitarian intervention. We can really trace the decision through the 5 steps of the ladder for each case.
Let's start with the classic highest pressure test. Scenario, a missile launch detected. This is the ultimate non-negotiable time-critical event.
The time frame here it's brutal. You're likely looking at under 10 minutes from the moment of launch detection to potential impact. So here's how the ladder works.
Step 1. Alert. The activation is instantaneous and it's automated. Space-based sensors and ground radar systems fuse their data. The C4ISR computer system automatically verifies the threat trajectory, the speed, the potential impact zone, and it matches that profile against a pre-authorized threat category in its database. There is zero human interpretation latency tolerated at this stage. It's pure machine speed.
Then step 2, consult.
Right. Within minutes, the relevant regional commanders and the Supreme Allied Command convene on that secure VTC line. Their consultation is not about whether the missile is hostile. The system has already confirmed that. It's only to confirm that the trajectory matches the criteria for the absolute highest level of pre-delegated authorization.
Just a final sanity check.
A very, very fast one. Which leads to step 3, authorize. Because the threat profile matches a pre-delegated category, like confirmed threat to a member capital, the authorization is immediate. It overrides the normal peacetime chain of command. The pre-approved rules of engagement for missile intercept are instantly applied.
And step 4, act.
Regional air defense forces receive the order instantly. They initiate interception procedures. The conversion from authorization to physical deployment is seamless and rapid. Ideally, the interception happens far outside the target area, over the ocean or unpopulated land.
And the most critical insight from this scenario, for me, is the political follow-up. The Council of Defense Ministers, they're only briefed post-action.
That is the clearest possible evidence of pre-delegation working as intended. The military acts instantly to save lives and assets, but they are operating entirely within the legal and strategic bounds that the political body established months or years prior. The politicians then convene for the stabilization phase, step 5, to ratify the action, manage the diplomatic fallout, and ensure the global messaging is consistent with the lawful justification.
It completely reverses the normal bureaucratic flow.
Completely. Framework down in peacetime, confirmation up during the crisis.
But I have to ask, doesn't this run a huge risk? If the military acts first and the politicians are only briefed later, what happens if the intelligence was flawed? Or what if the commander's interpretation of that pre-delegated envelope was just slightly incorrect?
That's the critical check that's built into the governance triad. First, that two-source confirmation requirement in the alert phase is designed to minimize the risk of flawed intelligence. But second, and more importantly, the framework of pre-delegation is intentionally narrow. It only applies to threats where time is zero, like an inbound missile. If the action taken fell outside that predefined legal envelope, the SAC and the responsible regional commander would face immediate, severe accountability before the political council. The risk is managed by how strict the pre-vetting process is, and by the severity of the consequences for any operational commanders who exceed their mandate.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to scenario B, a holy site threat. This introduces a huge amount of political sensitivity alongside the tactical threat.
This one is different because the threat is often more prolonged. It might involve strategic signaling rather than a few minutes of interception time, so the latter adapts.
How so?
Step 1. Alert. Shared intelligence confirms a credible and imminent threat of military action or sabotage against a designated internationally protected holy site or some other critical strategic asset. Step 2. Consult. The decision makers consult rapidly, but here they're focusing not just on the threat itself, but on the appropriate deterrent posture required. Since this is so high profile, the consultation confirms the need for an immediate, visible, but proportional deployment.
And the authorization.
Step 3. Authorize. A rapid deployment is authorized locally by the regional command. They're operating under a defined envelope specifically for protective posture missions. This authorization would include both non-lethal and lethal rules of engagement specific to protecting static infrastructure.
So step 4, ACT, is putting troops on the ground.
Right. Forces deploy instantly to secure the site. But, and this is the key difference, during the ACT phase, there's an added coordination layer. All strategic signaling and diplomatic messaging are coordinated centrally by the SAC and the military committee.
And that illustrates that blend you were talking about. Local speed for operational security, getting troops on site quickly, but central strategic control over the message. Why is that central control so crucial here?
Because if the local commander just deploys troops without any central signaling, that deployment might be interpreted by neighbors or international observers as an aggressive escalation or an act of occupation. Central control ensures the accompanying diplomatic message, this is a temporary, protective, lawful posture under international mandate, is unified, precise, and released at the exact same time as the troop movement. The blueprint ensures the operational speed never outpaces the political objective or the controlled narrative.
Okay, finally, scenario C, a humanitarian catastrophe. This shows the system applying the same rapid mechanism to non-kinetic action.
Exactly. A sudden crisis, like a major earthquake or a massive refugee flow, demands the same decision speed as a military threat, because the cost of delay is still measured in human lives.
So, step 1, alert.
The disaster command mechanism activates. This is a specialized arm of the alliance that uses the same C4ISR backbone. Intelligence confirms the scale of the disaster, the required volume of aid, and the necessary logistical corridors.
Step 2, consult.
A rapid secure conference confirms the activation of the alliance's disaster response protocols. This includes the immediate reallocation of military assets, transport planes, naval vessels, from combat readiness to humanitarian logistics.
And step 3, authorize. This is where the bureaucracy usually kills you in these situations.
And this is where the pre-delegated authority is designed to sweep it all away. Overflight permissions, customs clearances, security guarantees, immediate funding release, all of it is instantly authorized across all member states because the severity criteria have been met.
Which leads to step 4, act.
Airlift, ground convoys, and naval corridors are opened rapidly. The military committee ensures the logistics are standardized and interoperable so everyone is working off the same plan.
And the measurable difference cited in the source material aid arriving in hours, not days, that really is the utility of this structure in a non-combat situation. Bureaucracy is the enemy of effective aid, and this system is designed to defeat that bureaucratic inertia using military-level decision speed.
In every one of these scenarios, you see the system prioritizing momentum and preparation. The implementation of strict time caps and the reliance on pre-delegation mean the alliance never enters a decision vacuum. It allows it to transition seamlessly from alert to action with minimal political lag.
Okay, let's try to unpack this. This has been a really comprehensive deep dive into the nervous system, the command and control blueprint of this proposed alliance. I think the key takeaways for me are that structural speed is achieved by institutionalizing discipline.
That's a great way to put it.
And this discipline, it seems to rely on two major innovations. First, decentralized power through those empowered regional commands. And second, political foresight that's achieved through pre-delegated legal authority.
The blueprint is, fundamentally, an argument for institutionalizing foresight and discipline over the kind of reactive diplomacy we're used to. It argues that a large alliance can only be truly effective if it commits, in peacetime, to a structure that allows for instant action during a crisis.
The whole system is predicated on that philosophical and strategic belief you mentioned earlier.
Unity without decision is weakness. Decision with unity is strength. That's the core philosophy.
And crucially, the system is designed to be decisive, but as the source material repeatedly emphasizes, decisive without becoming reckless. The governance triad and that lawfulness requirement built into the decision ladder. They enforce political constraint and legal boundaries before the trigger is ever pulled.
Which is supposed to mitigate the inherent risk that comes with speed. It's a compelling, incredibly detailed vision for overcoming the decision paralysis that has historically plagued multinational security agreements. They have meticulously defined the structure, the precise step-by-step process, and the technical backbone required to ensure a comprehensive response can happen in minutes, not weeks.
We have spent a lot of time exploring how this blueprint achieves speed by setting time limits and pre-delegating authority for known threat categories like missile launches or cyber attacks. But that foundation of knowledge now brings us to the final, critical, and I think provocative question that has to hang over any system this ambitious.
The ultimate stress test.
Exactly. The challenge we have to leave you, the listener, with is this. How does this entire system adapt when a genuinely novel threat emerges? An asymmetric, unprecedented crisis that doesn't fit neatly into any of the pre-approved rules of engagement, forcing the political council to convene and deliberate in real time under pressure. And furthermore, what happens when the relentless pressure of a sustained high-intensity conflict environment inevitably threatens those strict minute-by-minute time caps that this entire decisive structure depends upon? That is the real test of its long-term resilience.